Welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is a place where successful thought leaders in the SAP space come to share their leadership styles, their tips, and their unique stories on how to run successful large-scale SAP programs. Listen to the podcast to learn from their successes, their failures, their career stories, and their inspirations.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link below.
Welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. I was just checking online here to make sure I got the right episodes. There's been quite a few, but we're on season 4, episode 4, and we've got fantastic guests. Andree.
Hey, thank you very much for having me, Jake.
No problem. So we're going to find out a bit more about Andree now. So just a quick fire question round. And yeah, no longer than 2 minutes, but we'll dive straight in. So what's your full name, Andree?
My full name, Andree Leidenfrost.
Nice. Tell us a bit more about the middle name. I like that.
I don't even know, but it's a very Germanic name. Yes, but my parents were also quite Francophile, so that's where the Andree comes from, which is really Andree, of course.
Excellent. And whereabouts are you from in Germany?
From the northwest, hailing from, just south of the North Sea, from the coast, and a little bit east from the Dutch border, so 15 k's more to the west, and I would have been a Dutchie.
Nice. And how long have you been in Australia?
Oh, almost 23 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, fully naturalised. Never lose that accent, of course, but hey.
And tell us a bit about the best job you've ever had.
Well, that's a very open question, right? And therefore, I give you the truthful answer, which has nothing to do with my current profession. Okay. I was actually a sluice operator or a lock operator.
A smooth operator?
No, smooth. No, not very smooth. No, I was operating a lock on one of the canals of where I come from. So there's basically boats going up and down the canal, and I was just 16 years old. It was my first job, and I made some money. And I would sit, on the gates of the lock in the morning, and the mist would just be lifting, and I would be reading my friend's Kafka, and it was really good.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been trying to replicate this ever since, but I've come close, but not quite.
So 16-year-old working, what did that teach you about around today, like today's work?
What it certainly did teach me in the end was that it is good to do that kind of on the side, but it's not quite good to do it as your main occupation. You have to find something where you actually put a bit more into it and get a bit more out of it, which is certainly what happened since.
Okay, well, we'll talk a bit about that in a bit, obviously SAP. But yeah, tell us a bit about your, I'm going a bit left field here, so your favourite drink, because I know you're a whiskey man, aren't you?
Yeah. I like my Lagavulin. I like them peaty as they come. So that's basically it. Neat, no ice.
Nice.
Room temperature.
I know you like your Japanese whiskies as well, huh?
Yeah, not so much. No, or probably lack of experience. I'm kind of more like the classic kind of guy. If it's from Scotland, I'll probably try it.
Nice. Okay. So your bucket list thing to do?
Oh God, how much time you got? How big's the storage device
30 seconds.
We're recording on? Yeah, okay, 30 seconds. Yeah, many things. I would like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro if I can do that. Certainly travel way more, especially after COVID. But yeah, other than that, just increase my experiences, overall knowledge of what's going on, trying to understand different peoples better, because that always helps you. So there's nothing too specific. I got to go this, I got to do that. But Kilimanjaro is probably one thing that's one of those list items.
You seem like a keen traveller, Andree. What's the best place that you've been? Oh,
definitely Southern Africa. So that's I would go there in a blink. I would work there. I would do whatever there. Yeah.
Why that place?
I think it's a combination of things. It's obviously reasonably exotic when you're from the wet and cold northwest of Germany originally. I mean, maybe it's slightly less so now that I've been in Australia for a long time. But it's a combination of the food, the culture, the people, their attitudes, and then obviously, we got great landscapes here in Australia, but you got the game, right? You got the wildlife in Africa, which is just fabulous, and all these different experiences. And there's nothing like making a coffee in the morning, just kicking the log in the bonfire and making it go burst into flame, and then get some hot water, get a coffee, and then watch them giraffes walking by in the distance, right? It's a fabulous way to start the day, and it gives me goosebumps just talking about it. So that really floats my boat.
Nice. Okay, and then bring it back to more work related question and your management style. Andree. If you could describe it in one word, what would it be?
One word. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with my Teutonic background, probably people will not be entirely surprised. Assertive will probably it. I don't mince words. And I still hope to keep it cordial and on topic, of course, at all times, but it will typically be clear.
I was expecting that. I don't know.
Oh, were you? Yeah. Okay. Well, how long have we known each other for? Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
All right. So let's dive into the crux of the podcast, Andree. I'm fascinated by your journey. How did you get into SAP initially, and what's your story?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, well, I got into SAP because really, believe it or not, I wanted to go to Australia. That was the true reason. So I studied long and hard, including a PhD in geophysics. So I basically would call myself both a scientist and an engineer, but I thought it was maybe a little bit too specialized, a little bit too, separated from people's everyday problems, if you want to call it that. So I was looking for something else to do that was still involving, problem-solving skills that I think I have some, and use of technology to solve the problems. And I wanted to go to Australia. And lo and behold, there was an opportunity. My best mate from high school, he met an Australian girl. I had something to do with that, but that was, we don't talk about that.
Operator.
We don't talk about that. And they went back to Australia, and he set up a little company, and I followed 2 years later, and that's how it all started.
So your friend had a company within SAP, or?
No, a little boutique consulting company.
Right. Okay.
Yes. So and we ran that basically together with first two and then one other person for about 10 years. Unfortunately, then it fell apart. But sometimes that happens, right? You may not. Your threads through life may not converge forever, and we parted ways. But yeah, that's how I got into it, and that's how I got into Australia. And certainly, the passion, or whatever you want to call it, for that, understanding the problem and then solving it using obviously technology and also other means like change management and all that. That passion certainly has stayed with me. So I think my decision was the right decision, definitely. As opposed to what my professor thought at the time. He thought I was throwing it all away, and he was not happy. But I think he was wrong, because clearly, when you go to uni, and especially if you do science or engineering, the main thing, it doesn't really matter what it is about. The main thing is you develop your problem-solving skills, your analytical thinking. You go, how do I break down the problem? How can I make it handleable? Everything else gets outdated so quickly these days anyway. That's the only thing that really stays with you. Maybe some foundational, equipment, such as knowing to read and to write and stuff, but we learn that typically a bit sooner in school. But that problem-solving skills, I think that served me well.
Sure.
That I picked up there.
So have you always had that passion for solving problems, or do you think you've found that once you've got into SAP? Yeah. So
when I was about 8 or so, when my transistor radio stopped working, I was crestfallen, and I figured it out. I basically went to the local electronics shop and probably annoyed the heck out of everyone. But I got this thing, it doesn't work, what can I do? And in the end, I did identify that it was an analog circuit, the amplifier circuit had blown, and I removed it, and I bought a new one for 5 Deutschmarks, and it was working again. The only thing I've never been able to do is take a clock apart. I've done that a lot, but put it back together and it would work. I've never been able to do that. But other than that, I typically like to understand how stuff works, and if it's not right, I'll fix it. And obviously that's a tiny example, but I was pretty young then. So nowadays, hopefully the problems are a bit juicier and all that. But I think it's always been there. But certainly there's this thing of saying you have the drive, you have the passion or tenacity to do it, but then you still need to be equipped and you need to pick up skills to become more effective and efficient at it. And that's certainly what happened when I was at uni. There's no doubt about that.
The reason why I asked the question as well, Andree, is you've got that nature versus nurture debate, and I know obviously you said you wanted to come to Australia. That's what got you in there. But around that problem solving thing, do you think you've always had that, or do you think you've developed it, and coming along the lines of that nature versus nurture debate? Yeah.
So I think I've always had a knack for figuring out how stuff works. I would ask, how does the television work? And my parents wouldn't know. They said, you turn it on and then it works. And I go, no, that's not good enough for me. So same thing. You have to be, well, not you have to be, but I have always been curious about my surroundings, and I always wanted to figure out how stuff works. So really almost cliche engineer, you could say, you know. But as I said before, there's one thing of wanting to find something out and then being as best as possible equipped to be able to do so. And then to move it on a bit, the next step is obviously how can you scale yourself, right? Because you can only do so much as a single person. So ideally, or at some point, most people, or at least I got to a point where I went, okay, I can't do all this myself. How can I scale myself? And then you get into a whole new world of interesting challenges, and that is that how do you basically work with a group of people, align them towards a goal, and make them all, you know, work towards that goal. That is certainly certainly another challenge, and it's obviously not mechanical like a clock. It's trying to, you know, relate to people and understanding what they are good at, how they work, and then try to put the jigsaw. So you find a way to put together a team where you know, really let people's capabilities shine. For that, you need to obviously identify their capabilities and bring them out so they can really realize their potential, and, you know, find a way to compensate for the weaknesses that we all have. Ideally, because you team them up with someone else who's got compensating skills and capabilities. So that was certainly something that after a few years in the SAP business, I gotta get going with that one, because I can't scale myself. You know, I'm only one guy. And therefore, as Keith Richards says, always be nice to the roadies. Not that I would compare my team members to roadies, as in lowly. Quite the opposite, because Keith Richards knows the roadie can make you sound really crap, or can enable you, right? But really, you're all in this together. You're a team, and it doesn't really matter who's on the stage and who's in the back. You're all in this together, you know. And I think that's that's a really important thing as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. So there's a lot to unpack there, Andree. Around, I want to touch on that scaling yourself piece, and when you look at those team members, what do you look for? What certain attributes do you look for, and to think, do you know what, that person I can, you know, scale myself in? And,
so I think the two most important things to start with are integrity and potential. Right? Someone who I don't think has integrity, and obviously you don't necessarily find that out straight away, it's hard, will probably not stay true and will not actually play the role they need to play, because they flop eventually, or something doesn't work. And potential, I think, is much more important, in my experience at least, than realized skills, right? So I will always prefer someone who I go and say, that's a smart person, over someone who's necessarily been doing stuff and has a resume as long as their arm, demonstrating that they've done stuff that I think is not really relevant, because things always change, and there is very little. I mean, some things are a bit repetitive, but many of the problems you go and say, no, there's always a twist to it. There's always a difference, right? You can solve, I don't know, you know, how do we design an invoice processing process? How can you design that in the best possible way? And the answer is, it depends. Right? It depends on the context you're doing it in, the organization you're doing it for. It depends on the technology you have. It depends on the constraints you have, right? So always approaching things with an open mind and thinking freely, and not actually just, you know, regurgitating preconceived stuff. That's, I think, really important. So integrity, so people stand up and it's clear that they will do that, and that potential to actually be able to understand the situation, take it in, be open, and basically recombine what they know with, you know, all the things that they still have to figure out, and being aware that there's always stuff that you have to still figure out. Sure.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to unpack as well, Andree, you mentioned your management style is assertive, and then you mentioned around scaling yourself through other people. Now, since I've got into leadership, obviously each person's very, very different, and are motivated by different things and like to be led by, you know, different ways. How have you noticed over the years? So I've had previous guests on the podcast, and it used to be, you know, everyone used to be quite assertive and like micromanage, and not saying the two are related, but they definitely used to be more assertive than today, where I see it's changed a lot. Have you noticed it change a lot as well, and how have you had to adapt your style?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. I would say what has probably changed is my comfort level of around not knowing everything. Mm-hmm. Right. So when I was probably a bit younger, less experienced and all that, I thought I have to in detail keep an eye on everything. And as you, I don't know, hopefully grow and get a bit older and all that, you pull that back a bit, right? It doesn't work with everyone in the team. Some people need a bit more guidance than others. But in general, look, I mean, we're obviously working in an industry where you got lots of talent, you got lots of clever people, and you got lots of people who have, who are pretty strong-headed and opinionated. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes maybe that's not so great. Mm-hmm. But I think giving people the space, like giving them the context and going and saying, look, this is kind of like where we're heading. What do you think about this? How does this all work? Do you have any questions? Does this make sense? Do you think we're on the right path? But once people are hopefully aligned, then you attenuate your, direct, interaction based on their personality a bit. I can give you an example.
Yeah, go for
right,
it.
Which is something that I think.
I love this, by the way. That's brilliant. Yeah, I love the comfort of not knowing or having that level of comfort. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So many years ago, and when I was working for a leading news outlet in Sydney, I was basically coming in, taking on that new role, and taking over their team, and taking over all sorts of stuff, including operational matters. And the situation was such that, I'm exaggerating just slightly, nobody was allowed to do anything without triple sign-off from the support manager and all sorts of things. And on the other hand, everyone was saying, you guys don't get anything done. And I went, well, that's quite easy, right? On one hand, you have a very rigid policy that basically cripples everyone, and also, in a way, implicitly accuses everyone of being non-diligent nitwits, right? And on the other hand, there's no output, right? So I basically went, why are we doing this? Because people can't be trusted, blah, 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 right? And that was, and if you had seen what happened, I went, yeah, okay, well, I may have to see it, because we will not do this. But what I have an expectation of is that people basically have an understanding of the responsibilities they bear. If they are making changes to an SAP environment or otherwise, functional changes, code changes, technical changes, whatever, we are going through a software logistics process. But they have to basically know what the rules are. They have to basically understand how important it is that their work is actually up to quality standards. Mm-hmm. And I want this to be largely self-governed. No, you can't do that. Everything will stop. And I said, yeah, look, we're going to obviously keep an eye on things. And there may be in the initial phase the occasional hiccup. But in general, that's what we will do. And effectively, there's two things to that. One is that was the discussion I had with the support manager at the time. And I did discuss things openly with her, but eventually I gave the direction. That is what we will do. And I also said, and I need you to be on board with that, because you're still the support manager, not me. But I want our policy and our approach to change. If it doesn't work, we'll revisit it. But can we do that? That's on you. And I said, sure, it's on me. I'm the boss. Yes, fine. I lead this team. Okay, good. Little speech, to the team, and saying exactly the same thing. And I said, look, here's the thing. Very simple. I expect you, and I know you are, good people. You have good intentions. You know what's right, what's wrong. You know what a good job looks like. And I would just like to say to you that I will trust you in doing a good job, because we want to be a good team. A good team only comes together when each and everyone is pulling their weight, paying attention, do peer reviews. When you don't know something, raise it. Don't release anything that you're not happy with. Right? That's fine. There's no blame. There's nothing here. But I want to tear down all these walls of everything has to be quintuple signed and explained all over again. Yeah, did that work? Yeah, it did work. Right, there were a few people, and there's always a few, people who are maybe not up to scratch or maybe don't have good intentions. But in general, it worked really well. There were no major disasters, and we increased our productivity tremendously. And you may have heard that's a few years ago that you may have heard of things like continuous integration and all this stuff, right? When you look at SAP software logistics recommendations, right, where you basically bundle up releases and do all these things, that's something that I look at quite critically, because it implies that you have this big apparatus to really do this, non-grassroots, let me call it that, auditing of all sorts of changes. Whereas I like to, as much as possible, try to empower the individual and let them shine. Because the other thing is, not only is it faster and more efficient, but people take much stronger ownership of the work they do. And if something goes wrong, that ownership will save you. Because there's no point in then setting a new team on the task of figuring out what went wrong. No. What did we change? Who owns these changes? Okay, let's get together. Let's figure out what went wrong here. And that's typically much quicker. So anyway, that's a very long monologue. Sorry about that, but it's a real world example where there was big resistance, but it definitely was a resounding success. It worked.
I remember when Amanda Oakenfield was on the podcast. She said, no one sets out in the morning saying, I'm going to bring this company down, or an agenda to bring down the project, or no one does that. So yeah, I like it. You're putting trust in people and giving them empowerment. So yeah, that's good. I think your management philosophy is really shining through. But if you could define it, how would you define that, Andree?
Okay, so first of all, I think it does depend a little bit, but in general, the important thing to me is that it is clear what, as a group, as a community, whatever you want to call it, we're actually aiming for. There has to be that agreement, right? Because typically we're talking about whether it's actually project work or whether it's what we call BAU work. The thing is that there's always at least two parties. There's one party that actually makes stuff or keeps it running, right? Which is kind of like the management I would concern myself with. And then on the other side, you have the organization, the business, and they want stuff, right? Now, there may be strategic goals somewhere up here, pie in the sky stuff. There may also be stuff that is much closer to the ground with individuals. So in terms of management style, I think it's really important that people have the opportunity to understand what the higher level goals are, how they break down into what do we do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's delivering new stuff or whether that's just keeping the systems operational. But it's equally important that we acknowledge that there's two sides to the coin. As program or support people, we only exist because there is a business that needs our help, right? And making that clear and also making that part of your everyday management interactions is quite important, and also fostering that interaction and alignment with the business. Right, is really important. And I'd like to give another example briefly for that. I will be brief.
Go for it, yeah.
But it's one of the things where I almost, when I first heard of when you having me on, so we were basically looking at something, and it was kind of like a it was probably the tail end of stabilization of an implementation project, and it was all not entirely happy. And again, I was engaged, came in to look at things. We were supposed to deliver, a whole range of continuous improvements. Fair enough. And you go, yeah, that's good. And I said, okay, how do we know what the requirements are? Oh, we just wrote them down. I said, where do you get them from? Oh, we just looked at the system, and I said, well, who's raised this? Oh, yeah, someone in the business, but they don't want to talk to us. And I said, what? These are business requirements, right? So the first word in this term is business. So we can't do that. That's not going to work. Show me, look, what about this? Anyway, I said, look, no. We have to get together with the business. They don't want to talk to you. Who is it? I'll talk to them. I'll talk to their manager. I'll talk to whatever. So, yeah, in the end, it was hard. But in the end, first of all, we actually worked through the requirements with the business, and people were a little bit miffed to begin with because they said, we've been through this 3 times and nobody ever listens and understands us, and they're going, give us another go, please. And I said, and the other thing is that, we're not going to go off and just not talk to you ever again until we've done it, and then we show it to you, and then you say it's all wrong. No. We'll do something that we call agile. It's really cool, and what it actually entails is, we kind of like iteratively get to the end point. But what we would like you as a business person to do in this is, can you please continue to work with us? We would like to show you things in the interim to see whether we're on the right path. Can we try that? Oh, it's going to waste my time. I said, can we try this? And it was a bit tricky. We found 2 people in the business that were willing to give it a go. And again, from there, it actually worked. They got what they needed. But it works 2 ways, because not only did they get what they needed in terms of what they had originally said they needed, no, they got what they really needed. And more importantly, what they didn't get what they didn't need. Whereas when you don't talk to each other and you never see what's going on, you will waste a lot of effort on building stuff that nobody wants because of misunderstandings or whatever it might be, right? So management style, as I said before, of course, being assertive, being clear, not mincing words, but at the same time being really collaborative and open and understanding where everyone is staying and giving everyone the space to basically make the contribution that they need to make, so that you form a bigger team, right? A meta or mega team between the business and whatever your delivery and design function actually is, right? So they don't sit side by side, but they're basically amalgamated almost in one team, which also then means that whenever something goes live that works, the business will go, yeah, I did that. As well as the people that implemented it, right? So you're one big team, and that is the ideal state. Do I always, am I always nice and friendly and smiling like now? No. Sometimes everyone, may be a bit tense when stuff doesn't work and all that, but the general gist of what certainly I'm trying to do and what I think works is what I just described.
Excellent. Well, thank you for giving us that example again. That's brilliant. Andree, coming back to your career, you would have worked with numerous people. Who's been a biggest influence on your career, and what did you learn from them?
I would like to name 2, if I may. They're very different. So I think from a leadership, locking onto the vision, and then through stormy seas pursuing a goal, steady, but with tenacity and as much speed as possible. There is a gentleman named Robert Doyle, who's now the CFO of Domain. I worked under Rob when I was at, and I can as well mention it, when I worked at Fairfax. That was a tremendous journey for all of us, including, I'm sure Rob would agree, for him. But it was fantastic to work with Rob close up, because he's been, going through these transformations before. He also has a personality that is very conducive to staying that steady course, but also not wavering. And it was great to observe that, and I hope I picked up a couple of things from that, even though I'm still bowing to the master. Obviously nothing to do with actual solution design, and that's one of the strengths of Rob, who would say, I don't know anything about this. I can tell you what we need to achieve, but Andree, you have to tell me how we're going to do this, and you have to actually make it happen. But and he was very good at that as well, empowering me in that regard. Now, coming to architecture, we're talking a bit more about solution architecture and actually identifying what is really needed as opposed to wanted, and then actually coming up with contemporary implementation approach towards that. Is my very good friend and former business partner, Adrian Patrick Vaughan, who I would like to publicly plug in this podcast, and you won't cut that out, because he is really good. The only thing is he will probably curse me for doing that, because he's already pretty busy. But Adrian is someone who you go and say, if you're looking at the combination of, drive towards doing the right thing, sheer intelligence, experience, thinking outside the box, always staying up to date with things, he's your man.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely be asking him if he wants to come on the podcast after. That'd be great. Andree, this has been brilliant today. I want to ask you one more question around your biggest failure and what did you learn from that. So yeah, if you can get vulnerable, please.
Where to start? There's so many to choose from. Yeah, I think maybe one thing that was quite hairy was when I was still in this business partnership that I mentioned before. We were subcontracting to one of the, well, whatever it was then, Big 4, 5 something, for a leading commercial real estate organization, and it was, how can I describe it? It was getting increasingly clear that we were not on a good path, and we were having meetings where we are deviating so much from standard. We're basically trying to make the system do something that it really wasn't designed for, and there were certain design principles that we had to bypass whole swaths of standard functionality to make it work, and it was getting worse and worse. Anyway, the whole thing dragged on, and we did raise this with the prime implementer, but they went, oh no, it's all good. They didn't really understand it, but they said it's all good. SAP advice at the time was basically also, yeah, you know. In the end, it all fell into a heap. It was all terrible, and it was, yeah, not very good. The point is, in hindsight, probably it was a difficult situation, but probably it would have been good to engage more directly with representatives from the client, and to try and stop the thing before it went where it actually eventually went. So that was certainly something that I'm not proud of. But sometimes the circumstances are a problem, but I still think we could have done more, and obviously I could have done more.
So is that where your methodology around connecting with the business as much as you can, do you think that's where it's come from?
Certainly that would have, if not where it comes from, but at least significantly amplified it. By all means, yeah, I think you got that exactly right.
Excellent. Okay. I'm going to ask one more. Cast your mind back to your 21-year-old self. Imagine you were sitting opposite the table, having one of your whiskies. What advice would you give yourself?
Don't be afraid, and don't think that because you're a small town boy you have to stop in Hamburg, which fortunately I didn't. But I think if I had a chance back at 21, I would give myself a boost to try to do well even more than what I've done. I mean, having said that, small town, Hamburg, Sydney, I come from a very modest background, to say the least. But obviously, if you are being emboldened by someone who encourages you at an earlier age, then that gives you an additional boost. So that's what I would do to myself.
Excellent, Andree. Absolute pleasure today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. That was awesome. It was really good.